Good morning, everybody. I'm Paul Lisnek.
And I'm Timon Bradley. Welcome to WGN-TV Political Report.
May history be able to say that the end of this chapter of American darkness began here tonight.
Coming up this morning, Joe Biden moves up the ticket. After a decades-long career in Washington, Biden becomes the Democratic nominee for president.
And later, Republicans prepare to respond, looking ahead to the RNC with the co-chair of the Illinois GOP.
Here we go. This week, a focus on the race for president. For Joe Biden, a half-century-long career in politics culminates with a nomination to the Democratic presidential ticket.
And Timon, in his acceptance speech, a promise to purge what he called the darkness of fear of the Trump administration.
But while I'll be a Democratic candidate, I will be an American president. I'll work hard for those who didn't support me, as hard for them as I did for those who did vote for me. That's the job of a president, to represent all of us, not just our base or our party. This is not a partisan moment. This must be an American moment.
So much to talk about. Connie Mixon is the director of urban studies at Elmhurst College.
And Will Adler is an associate professor of political science at Northeastern Illinois University. They both join us this morning to talk about what they saw and we saw this past week. Good morning, everybody. Guys, hey, we've got some specifics for you, but let me start. Connie, I'll start with you. First, what did the Democrats need to accomplish, and did they do it?
You know, they were first up for their convention, and they were forced to be creative, and they had to innovate with the first ever convention that was held through a digital format. They were essentially building the airplane while they were flying it, yet it was exceptionally well executed. It was tightly produced, and the messaging really felt right for this moment in history. The format, it captured our shared reality, and you know, what would normally be rally speeches turned into personal conversations. And I think the lack of a crowd really helped to convey that seriousness.
Will you agree?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think one of the interesting things about it is that because of the intimacy of it, you know, kind of lacking the crowds cheering and all that, it actually made it feel almost like when Biden in particular last night was speaking, that he was speaking directly to us, kind of akin to when a president does an Oval Office address. And for that reason, it felt I would say, this is almost a cliche, but very presidential.
Yeah, it was different. We've never had a nominating speech like this. One of the things that the vice president talked about is that America had to make a choice, and we want to play for you Vice President Biden talking about that now. I think we have it.
This is simple. Are we ready? I believe we are. We must be. You know, all elections are important. But we know in our bones this one is more consequential. As many have said, America is at an inflection point, a time of real peril, but also of extraordinary possibilities. We can choose a path of becoming angrier, less hopeful, more divided, a path of shadow and suspicion, or we can choose a different path and together take this chance to heal, to reform, to unite.
So Will and Connie, over on Fox News, every analyst there praised Joe Biden's speech. What do you make of that? What's up with that? Is that strategic so that progressives, the Bernie Sanders wing of the Democratic Party, maybe gets upset that they didn't hear a lot of Democratic red meat over the past week?
I don't think so. I mean, on the the Democratic Party were complaining. A speech this week, AOC had her only 60 seconds. Some people were upset about that, I guess. But I feel like the people on Fox News were legitimately praising the speech because they were also surprised that it was that good, because maybe they had also bought into the rhetoric from Trump and the GOP that Biden's going senile, Biden's too old, he's losing it. And the fact that he did a legitimately good speech is kind of surprising to them, I think.
Connie, did it feel like this convention was trying to appeal to Fox News more than MSNBC?
Well, I think it was a good count. I think Fox had to acknowledge the speech that he gave, given that they had been building it up as it being typically, Sleepy Joe, or branding him as a far left liberal. And that was not the speech that we received. And in fact, if there was any nominee that the Democrats could have nominated, Joe Biden may actually be, the biggest threat to Trump's base. And I think they realize that.
Will, we all remember back to 1992 when James Carville reminded us it's the economy, stupid. And so every night on our own news, I would talk about the fact that somebody needs to talk about the economy here. We got a little of it, not a lot. My question is this a year when it's the economy, stupid is not the operative factor? It's really COVID or something else?
Well, we've never had an election quite like this dealing with the coronavirus. What we know is that generally the economy is going to be the biggest issue in any election. When the economy is doing well, that benefits the incumbent party. When the economy is doing poorly, that will benefit the challenger. So I don't think anybody is thinking that won't be true this year. The only question is, do people sort of do a discount factor in their heads, well, the economy's bad, but it's not the president's fault, it's the virus's fault? Or do they respond to the usual logic of the economy's bad, I blame the person in charge, akin to George W. Bush 2008 taking the blame for the Great Recession and McCain bearing the brunt of that? Or do they factor it in and say, well, it's not really Trump's fault? That's yet to be determined.
And I think, too, in terms of the economy, that seems to be the only policy area whatsoever that Trump is pulling ahead of Biden in. So I suspect that we'll hear more about that during the Republicans' convention next week.
And that's why I raised it, because Trump is about 10 points ahead on that issue.
Wanted to touch on something that Hillary Clinton brought up. One of the themes that we heard over the week was the importance of voting. It was emphasized by several speakers. In fact, we do have that moment when Hillary Clinton talked about this. I want to play that for you now.
Look, this can't be another woulda, coulda, shoulda election. If you vote by mail, request your ballot now and send it back right away. If you vote in person, do it early. Become a poll worker. Most of all, no matter what, vote.
What do you think, Connie?
Well, I think President Trump has been sowing seeds of doubt about the legitimacy of this election. And I think one of the hopes that the GOP may have is that there'll be enough cynicism out there and disengagement from the political process that Democrats will stay home. And we know from 2016 that if Democrats do disengage and just decide not to vote at all, Republicans win. So I think that's part of the effort that Democrats are trying to counter. As we heard throughout the convention, just about every speaker talked about making a plan to vote.
Hey, Will, we saw so many Republicans on the Democratic stage. Some people thought it might have been the Republican convention between John Kasich, Colin Powell, and others. Question, is that an effort? I mean, is it an effort to just give Republicans permission? Is it an attempt to expand the base, or was it a mistake?
I don't think it was a mistake necessarily. I think it was a strategic choice that they made, to appeal to the middle. And I guess in some ways it's not that surprising because Biden is in many ways the candidate of the middle. In the primaries, you saw him and maybe Amy Klobuchar and, maybe one or two of the others aim for that slot. And some of the other candidates try to win by, appealing to the left-wing progressive base of the Democratic Party, a strategy that was not successful. And so Biden is doubling down on what he feels has gotten him this far. and reaching out to people like John Kasich, who ran against Trump back in 2016, is part of that strategy. Colin Powell, on the other hand, doesn't surprise me as much because he also endorsed Barack Obama 2 times. But some of those names are perhaps new to a Democratic stage.
Yeah, Connie, quick chime in on Republicans' use.
Yeah, no, I thought it was an effective use of Republicans, and it's certainly going to be difficult for Republicans to match the diversity of voices that Democrats presented this week. We're really unlikely to see, many current or former Democrats at the Republican convention. I don't know, maybe Rod Blagojevich.
Yeah, good. Well, yes, he's a Trumpocrat. Good point. All right, stay with us, guys. We're going to take our first break, and still to come on the WGN-TV Political Report.
The Democrats held the darkest and angriest and gloomiest convention in American history.
Republicans prepare to make the case for President Trump at next week's RNC. More after this.